I'll wait for the YouTube to boot and we will be off to the races. Here we are. We are live on YouTube and let's start this recording. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming censorship and working towards spreading truth, knowledge, and awareness to empower you and communities around the world. Please help us spread the word with shares, reviews, and by becoming a member over at mattbelair.com for free or by donation. And most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest is the author of the best-selling book, Think Unbroken, and is a coach, mentor, and educator for adult survivors of child abuse. He spends his time helping others get out of the vortex to become the hero of their own story and take their life back. He hosts the Michael Unbroken podcast, teaches at Think Unbroken Academy, and is on a mission to create change in the world. Welcome to the show, Michael Anthony.
Matt, thank you, my friend. I'm super excited to be here with you today.
I'm so excited as well, dude. You have an amazing story. You're doing incredible work, and you know that's a very short bio. So for those who are just becoming familiar with you and what you're doing, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and how you got to doing the work you are today.
Yeah, man, I'll give you the elevator pitch version of it so we're not here all day, man. So I grew up in Indianapolis in the Midwest in America. My mother was a drug addict and alcoholic. At 4 years old, she actually cut off my right index finger. My stepfather, hyper abusive, the kind of guy that you pray is never your stepfather. And I never met my real father. By the time we were 8, we were constantly homeless. I lived between 8 and 10 years old with like 30 different families. We would steal food and water to survive. Imagine this, Matt, stealing water in America to survive, brother. By the time I was 12, I got high for the first time. When I was 15, I got expelled out of high school. Luckily got put into a last chance program, but didn't graduate high school on time because I was selling drugs, running with guns, breaking into houses, and hurting people. And my 3 childhood best friends, they were murdered. And when I was 18, I was trying to figure out what's next in life. Like, what is the solution for poverty and for chaos? And I was like, oh, it's money. So I decided legally, because this was very, very important, because my best friend had just got arrested. I have family in prison for life. I knew I was heading down a dead end path if I didn't change. I decided I'm going to chase money legally. I land with a Fortune 50 company. I make my first 100,000 when I'm 21 years old, and I reached that goal. Now you'd be like, that's amazing. But then here's what happened. All of the chaos of my life, my childhood, having an ACE score of 10, exacerbated with money. And I found myself 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking myself to sleep, and at 25 on my birthday, put a gun in my mouth. What happened after that was I had this moment one morning. I'm laying in bed. It's 11 o'clock. Again, I'm weighing 350 pounds, smoking a joint, eating chocolate cake, and watching the CrossFit games. Like, man, if that's not rock bottom, brother, I don't know what is. And in that moment, I made a decision. I said to myself, from here, everything changes. And I walked into the bathroom the next day, because that wasn't enough. It was the next day. I walk in the bathroom, I look at myself in the mirror, this round, fat, jaundiced face, this person, a reflection I didn't understand. And I said, Michael, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And in that moment, Matt, the words no excuses, just results started resonating with me. Fast forward over 11 years, here I am talking to you today through an entire and unbelievable journey of going through the mental health and trauma healing practices of therapy, men's group therapy, AA, NA, all the A's, going and getting deep into the science of trauma, reading all the books, going to all the conferences, listening to all the podcasts, doing all of the work, and eventually getting certifications from some of the leading experts in the world. And today, I've written a #1 best-selling book. I've coached thousands of people, and I'm obsessed with ending generational trauma in the world.
Holy crap, man. That is the most intense elevator pitch I've ever heard. And like, I just started to smile, like, not because like, I was like, holy smokes, how did you get to the other side of that? I was like, wow, dude, that is unbelievable. So I can imagine, when you're on stages speaking, like that is a really powerful story. And it reminds me of similar to David Goggins. Like that guy went through a lot of stuff and then was overweight and, said, you know what? Um, I got to change something right now. I feel like he's definitely gone on the other side and the guy is an absolute savage. I can't believe what he's able to do. So I'd love to ask you, like, why do you think it is that people wait so long to have like that really big catalyst, like put a gun to your mouth or like about to die, before they make that shift? Is there anything that we can do if we're kind of like in the lukewarm water of going the other way? How do we start to become the hero of our own story? Because I know that's a lot of what you teach.
Matt, that's the number one thing that I'm trying to solve for. If that was the variable in creating change in the world, then that's what I'm trying to figure out. And look, here's the reality. As men, the number one thing that we're told is to shut down emotionally. Don't cry, don't be a baby, put some dirt on it, man up. That stuff is so incredibly toxic, man. That's why we have all these men running around as little boys right now who are emotionally insecure and unstable. And look, that's embedded and ingrained in us. And so what happens is it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And then eventually it releases. And how does that release for most people? Through violence, through anger, through self-destructive and self-sabotaging behaviors, or in my case, through attempting to kill myself, right? And so many people go through that, men specifically, but women as well. A lot of my clients are women. The reality is we don't come from a society, especially if you live in Western cultures, where it's accepted that you are allowed to be an emotional being. So how do you move through that? I think first and foremost, right now, it's conversations like this, it's education, it's giving people across the board, male or female, the permission to understand that they're allowed to be emotional human beings. The nomenclature must change. To create change, we must create change. And so as we head down this path, the number one thing I'm always thinking about is like, how do you mitigate the risk of rock bottom before creating change? And that's the mission, man. That's the journey. And so that's the goal. How do we do that? By doing this and having these conversations and getting in people's faces about the reality that the nomenclature is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And in doing so many podcasts, it was exactly the catalyst of pain that got people to the other side. And so if we could figure that out, right? Because it would be super helpful. Because everyone's like, it's not so bad, right? But why can't it be great? Why can't it be amazing? Why can't you say I'm living my life purpose, I'm totally fulfilled, or at least closer to that mark? You know what I mean? Aiming for it while being content where you are. And what would you say to people who have gone through childhood trauma? Because it is way more prevalent than I think most people understand. It is not a unique thing. The numbers are staggering. And so if somebody's going through childhood trauma, how do you help them, well, deal with any kind of trauma? Like, do you have any steps or suggestions for people wanting to heal something like that?
Yeah, Matt, like you're spot on, man. Like, here's the reality. Child abuse in Western cultures is the elephant in the room of mental health care. Think about this, like realistically, and this isn't to be crass. You can beat your dog and you will go to jail. You can beat your child and people go, well, I guess they'll learn their lesson next time, won't they? It's unbelievable to me that we live in a society where we allot that, right? And so if you're going through this, I think, again, first it's education. We have to reframe the way that people think about discipline in the world. Like, can we be better leaders for our children? Can we be better guides for our adults, right? Ultimately, I think about the way that we end this is through expansion. We heal our adults and then we educate our children. And by proxy, that grows and grows and grows and grows. Now, to answer your question, if you're in this position where you're sitting with this and I think most of us know. Now, there are levels of this where you dissociate, meaning you kind of remove yourself as a protective mechanism from the experiences that you've had. That's normative, right? That is the human brain survival mechanism. So there's a level to it. Now, let's say you kind of know, you feel like, man, I remember there's some blank spots, but I know some bad things happen. Or on the other side, you absolutely remember. And like me, I have an incredible recall. I can remember most of the experiences of my childhood because that became my survival mechanism, being aware. And I think most of us understand and have had these experiences, which we can recall. The number one thing that you can do, and also simultaneously the most difficult thing that you can do, is if you're in this position where you recognize that something bad happened to you in your childhood is you have to acknowledge it. We hide from it. We stuff it down. We run from it. We try to get over it, right? And eventually it always catches up with us. By acknowledging it, you're making it real. Look, here's the truth about it. It's not about culpability. It's not your responsibility. You are not the one who did these things. You are not responsible for them. But I think about this every single day. If someone dumps garbage in your front yard, whether or not you want it there, it is there. And so you have a choice to make every single day. You can either step over that garbage and pretend it's not there, or you can clean it up. So much of trauma healing in this journey as adults, whether it's something that happened in your childhood or in your adult years or right now in this moment, so much of the journey is about acknowledging it and cleaning up the garbage, because whether you like it or not, it's your house.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be the toughest thing to do. And when I was working with athletes, the highest level athletes, X Games, Olympic, Olympic hopefuls, things like that, when they were coming in second, I would know in talking to them, right? They say, "Hey, oh Matt, we heard you're a really good sports psychologist. We'd love some help. I keep sabotaging." And I would know after doing this enough times, it was about 5 of them. I was like, "Huh, every one of them comes back to childhood trauma." Everyone. So I would just start a normal conversation with them, right? They would think it would go one way, but I knew where it was going to end up. And it was always that childhood trauma that prevented them from being the best that they could be, right? It's this like lens and this guilt and this filter that they have that would prevent them from being their best, because they would feel like, oh, if they stood out, they would get harmed in some sort of way. It was some sort of defense mechanism that they had from kids, which I thought was incredibly fascinating. And the other interesting thing is, if you don't know how to address it and heal it, it will stay with you forever. 60, 70, 80, 90 to your last day. But the beautiful thing is, you can begin the process of healing and overcoming that. So it's still there as a memory, but you don't have that lens. I imagine it's like the opposite of rose colored glasses, but you're unaware they're there. So as you're making your decisions, you have this filter on that you're unaware of because it's unconscious. But when you remove the charge of it, right? It's a memory, but it's not charged. You can now see clearly and make decisions and actions. And, in sports specifically, it's unconscious actions, right? To be your best in the moment. That filter's not going to come up and sabotage you. So I'd love for you to speak on that, and potentially what you've learned about mindset, because I know you speak a lot about mindset and the importance of it.
Yeah, Matt, that's so spot on, man. Like that's such a great way to create an analogy, because here's the truth about it, right? It may be a survival mechanism of don't be the best so you're not seen, right? Because one of the things, unfortunately, we understand is the whole idea of children are meant to be seen and not heard. But for some children, it's dangerous to even be seen. Right now, the other side of it too, it could be literally a single sentence that someone said to you, perhaps in passing, that forever creates this change and this domino effect about the way that you step up into your life. As simple as in that moment of, I want to be an artist, I want to be creative, so I take my crayons and I draw and I color, but I come outside of the line and immediately I'm reprimanded for that. And so for the rest of my life, the only thing I ever think about is stay in the line, stay in the line, stay in the lines. And that works for you until it doesn't, right? And then it starts to overcome, it starts to hinder you, it starts to be in your way. And so as you're in this process, like the thing, to the initial point I made about acknowledgement is about bringing it there. So you're not hiding from it. So you're not running from it. So you have somewhere to go. Think about this. If it is true, which I believe it is, that we are the sum total of all of our experiences leading up to this moment, then that means everything that's ever happened in our life informs us. And in order to get to where we want to go, we have to understand first how we got to where we are. So by understanding levels to get here to where we are, that creates the framework for moving forward up here to where we want to go. Now, in between, that's mindset plus action. And mindset plus action equals self-actualization. So I think about this all the time. If we can kind of create a framework for turning our life's problems into mathematical equations, there's always a solution on a long enough time frame. So now, thinking about this, you're faced with this really interesting conflict, because part of you has this understanding of, okay, I've acknowledged it. I know what has happened that got me to where I am. Maybe I'm going to therapy. Maybe I have a coach like Michael, whatever it is that I'm doing. And in order to get to where you want to go, you're measuring it. But at the same time you're measuring it, you're trying to create a game plan and a framework. You're still battling that shadow self, those inner experiences, those cognizant or even uncognizant idealizations that you have about yourself because of the embedded software that other people have ingrained in you from youth. So now it's really interesting because you're in this juxtaposition of understanding that you believe, at least to some extent, that you can create a path forward into your life while also simultaneously looking at the life that you've had up until this moment that's only been informed by those other experiences. So the reality is you have to make a choice. You have to make a decision because mindset plus action equals self-actualization. So you have to believe. Step number one in this, you have to believe that you're able to not only overcome, but to heal, to learn self-love, self-worth, self-validation, and everything else that comes along with who it is that you are. Effectively, you have to be willing to acknowledge that you have the power to create you. And I think about this every single day. The Michael sitting here talking to you right now is a caricature of the idea of the person that I thought I could be a decade ago. And through action, right? The showing up, the doing the hard work, the being uncomfortable, the growth, the development, the learning honesty, the learning patience and grace and gratitude and self-love and worth and all of those things, plus showing up every single day, going to the gym, eating right, not cheating, not lying, not stealing, not hurting, not all of those things, right? All of the difficulties have led me to this moment in which I'm sitting here talking to you as a self-realized person that I knew I could be based on my values, my wants, my needs, my interests, and my boundaries. So ultimately, look, people will say mindset, mindset, mindset all day long. That doesn't mean anything without action because I can wish everything into the world, but guess what, brother? There is no Disney moment. You have to earn every inch.
I love all that. That's incredibly well said. And you spoke about one thing that's important is the time frame, right? Is give yourself some time and space. And I use the example if you're out of shape, right? If you're really out of shape and you are 300 pounds, you're not going to lose that in a week. It's a whole change in everything. So take the weight off and give yourself a year or two. Right. And say, you know what, I'm going to commit to this. It doesn't have to happen immediately because that's how people go to these binge diets and these different things. And I remember talking to my cousin and, he was talking about some of the stuff he was doing to lose weight. And I was like, just show up to the gym every day. That just make that a habit. Just show up. Even if you don't know what you're doing, walk for 10 minutes, whatever the case is, just show up every day, not once or twice or three times a week. Because if you say that, all of a sudden there's going to be an excuse each time and you end up showing up the gym once a week or maybe twice, or in the good weeks it's three. Just show up every day and do a little bit. Make that a habit of who you want to become. And I love what you said too as well about the action piece. Action is the most important thing that we could do. If we just did that always and learned from it, we would be so much further ahead. Like the mindset, and also some people talk about motivation, how the motivation might not be there, but discipline will be there. I've learned that through sports, that most of the time I don't feel like training because I know what I'm about to put myself through, and so it's not a very comfortable thing. But when you have the discipline over the mindset, then you're taking the action. And that's the big piece because people kind of get stuck. We do need the process. We do need the mindset, but the godfather, the godmother is action always. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit on the journey for self-love and self-worth, because going through your scenario, I can imagine that would be a very challenging process. And for most people, they have just a ruthless inner critic. Wayne Dyer says you would never talk to yourself the way you would never talk to others the way you talk to yourself. And I give the analogy, and I'll pose this question. I'd love to hear your answer. How can we get from that inner dialogue that says, you can't do it, you're not good enough, what will other people think, other people are already doing it, you know what I mean, who are you to do this, all these negative inner critic things that happen, which is most common, to what if we had this inner critic that was the most supportive, like the most supportive friend, your mother, like your dog. You know, if you have a loving dog, imagine your dog was your inner critic, like, I love you, you got this, you're the best, you're the amazing, oh my goodness, you know what I mean, you're so great, oh, don't worry about failure, like that's just part of the process, you're learning, you know. Imagine we were able to install that. So how would you what do you think about that? How could we install that mindset, especially if, you know, coming from someone who would have a traumatic background?
Yeah, look, man, change only happens when change happens. Think about this. In your youth, for many of us, especially trauma survivors, we constantly hear you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not capable enough. It's no wonder your mom or dad left you. It's no wonder you're poor. It's this, it's that. And that's negatively reinforced not only in your home, but through societal aspects. And then the measuring point for whether or not we're successful in life becomes good enough. Well, you should be gracious. You should be good enough. You survived, blah, 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 whatever, right? Then you fast forward all the way to this moment. And in my case scenario, 27 years old, Matt, looking at myself and going, I don't know what self-esteem is. I've never loved myself. I've never once had a moment of feeling good about who I am. The only thing I've ever experienced is homelessness and poverty and bullying, and the list goes on and on and on and on, right? And then you're faced with a dilemma, right? Same way, it's this conflict. It's much like literature. It's the battle of you versus you. And within that battle, declarations must be made. And I think about this journey in a very binary way. It's either yes or it's no. Now, this isn't to say contextually there isn't room for gray area, because I certainly think there is. But for the most part, there's not. You either are or you are not. And looking and moving in towards this place where you start to create this bond with yourself, I look at it as a measurement, again, coming to the point of action. The only way that we get to a place where we build self-esteem and self-love, worth, and validation is through doing the things in alignment with who we are that challenge our character, right? That challenge the opposite ideal of who it is that we could be, right? And so when you're in this position, you've led all of these experiences in your life up until this point of not showing up for yourself, sabotaging, doing that, right? Can you do the opposite? Can every single day you push yourself into this position of being immensely uncomfortable by doing difficult things that move you in the direction that you believe you're capable of going, until the point comes in which you say, actually, this is no longer in alignment with who I am, right? And so then you shift and you move. The only way we grow is through doing things that make us uncomfortable. Think about this. As an athlete, you know you have failed a bazillion times at the things that you have tried. The problem with that is when you have this integration of childhood experience in your nomenclature, the idea of failure is not only detrimental, but terrifying. Why? Because anytime you've ever made a mistake up until this moment, there has been a ramification, public shame, embarrassment, beatings, whatever that thing may be. There's always been a moment in which I fail. Mathematical equation. We look at it this from a space of a hypothesis, right? I believe that if I fail, then the resulting action will be that I will suffer a consequence, thus eliminating my self-worth. That has been our experience until the moment that you recognize that it does not have to be. Now, the only way that you reframe that is by introducing a new hypothesis. If I fail, can I use that as a data point, right, to understand that moving forward, I still have potential to reach success because I will not repeat that pattern. And along the way, more importantly, to answer your question, I won't beat myself up about this. Coming back to my point about being binary, look, as you are on this journey and doing these very incredibly difficult and uncomfortable things, when you fail, you are going to have to introduce radical kindness to yourself. One of the statements that I have every one of my coaching clients write down is, I am a person that is kind to themselves. There is no gray area. This is yes or no. Either you are or you are not. And thus you move into that every single day. Think about this. Habits like going to the gym every day, it becomes habitual, and then it becomes second nature, and then it becomes a part of who you are. That's the same way about the way that we talk to ourselves. Now, initially, it's about noticing. Can I notice these moments when I'm being unkind to myself? You're stupid, you're dumb, you're fat, you're ugly, you're lazy, you're not good enough. And then take that negative reinforcement, flip it on its head, tell yourself the opposite, or more so, do the opposite action. I'm scared to go to the handball game because people are going to call me a loser because I'm a little bit overweight. Realistically, people don't even care that you're there. There are 8 billion people on planet Earth. They are not worried about you. Challenge yourself to be uncomfortable. Change the narrative in your head by saying, I am capable of going to the handball game, even though I might be a little bit overweight, because I love myself enough to be uncomfortable to see if I can step into the power that I believe I have.
That's brilliant, man. I agree with that. And I love everything you're saying. I think the first and most important thing you're talking about is redefining failure. And, when I'm teaching this to athletes and what I'd love to install into, children's minds is that, one of the scenarios is you miss the basketball shot, you just fail, whatever the case is in life, you write something and you get negative feedback. Well, what's the most powerful and positive perspective you can have from that situation? And you got to understand the universal truth is you're going to fail. Failure is an important part of learning. That's why skateboarding is so helpful, because 95% of it is failing. You know what I mean? And you're always growing. And so if you're not failing, that means you're not learning. You're just doing the things that you could do. You could just roll around, then you learn one trick and then you learn two, and then it just kind of keeps going. So we're always expanding. So if we're not failing, we're not expanding. And so that's such a really important point to understand. And how do we internally define failure? And another thing that you brought up that reminds me of something I heard is that, you build confidence by doing things that are aligned with who you are, what your values are, like who you truly want to be, who you want to build yourself into, right? You were one way and you wanted to architect the person you are today, and you were able to do that. And lack of confidence comes from breaking agreements with ourselves. We're like, I want to do this, and here's the action step, but I'm going to break this agreement, I'm going to break this agreement, I'm going to break this agreement. And all of a sudden you're not accountable to yourself. You're letting your own self down, so you don't feel good, right? And so a really simple thing you can do is just come up with 1 or 2 or 3 very simple things. Don't stack on 100 things, right? People will stack on way too much at first. Just 1 or 2 agreements for yourself, and do those every day, right? So if it's the fitness journey, say I'm going to walk every day for 20 minutes, but don't break the agreement. Make it something so simple that you can commit to, that it begins to change the tide. You don't say I'm going to work out for an hour, then I'm going to go on a juice diet, then I'm going to only watch positive things on TV, and which you should be doing anyway for your mental nutriments and your health and well-being. You're going to break that immediately because it's too much, right? Just start to shift the tide a little bit, and that action's going to carry you. And so I'd love for you to speak about something I think is really important. Is you talk about why we are the story we tell ourselves, and that inner dialogue is so critical. So I'd love for you to speak on that little bit about what you teach.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything, right? The way you think about yourself is everything. Think about this. If I don't believe in me, who will? If I don't love me, who will? If I don't show up for me, who will? Like, again, to my point, there's 8 billion people on planet Earth. It's really easy for us to seek validation from other people, right? For many of us, we have codependent behaviors. We look at the measurement of our validity, our validation, who we are, our worth as other people. We vie for their attention. We want them to give us the thing that we should be giving to ourselves, right? And so the difficulty in that is recognizing it and saying, actually, I need to build myself first. And by proxy, allow those other things to continue to raise you up, not to be the catalyst for how you feel about yourself. And I think that as you step further into this journey, you build that self-worth, that self-validation through not only telling the stories, but through the action. If you spend all of your time every single day bringing yourself down, then what do you think's going to happen? You will be at that level. You will be in this position, in this place where you don't feel good about yourself, where you're not showing up because you say, why bother? I'm already not good enough. You must break the cycle. This is secular. It's going to happen as long as you continue to allow it to happen. Again, change can only happen when you make change happen. And so in this moment, like literally right now, you could change your life forever. You could change your life forever by honoring the intuition, your gut feeling and reaction and response to the stimulus of your environment. Think about this. You hate your job. Your partner cheats on you and you stay in the relationship because it's quote unquote good enough. You aren't putting yourself in a position to be successful by taking that course or investing in that coach or listening to that podcast or whatever that thing is. In a moment, you could change everything in your life by making an opposite choice and decision. And through doing that, you start to change the narrative. You start to change the story. You have to ask yourself what is and what is not the life that I want to have. Either way, at the end of the day, you're making a choice. And here's what I always think about, Matt. I don't want to be on my deathbed wondering what if.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And it reminds me of, well, the first one is Seinfeld when George does opposite day and everything works out and he gets a job with the Yankees and everything turns out because he does the complete opposite of everything he normally does. And it basically, it just shows about stepping out of fear, right? And just being able to take that action. And, and I think that we as humans, we really contain ourselves to a box. We don't think about, what is like my maximum output potential? What could I truly do if I dedicated my life to it? And there's actually a point in time where I was, really struggling with mental health as well, and was like, and I considered, I was like, what would it be like if I took my own life? You know what I mean? It would be, I didn't get to the point of like, getting any things out, but I just started to consider it because I was like, this is really hard. Like, there's a lot of trauma. I was researching a lot about how the world worked and what was going on, and I was like, this is too much. This is way too much. So I go, okay, well, I don't want to do that because that's the easy way out, even though it can be hard. But what if I dedicated my life to one thing, right? And at the time, because I was athletic, I was like, what if I wanted to become a pro boxer? What if I gave every ounce of my life to that one thing, right? And so I don't think we consider that as humans, where we go, what if I gave everything in my life to live the greatest life based on my own values, based on my curiosities, based on my passions, and with the intention of making a positive impact while being content with where I am in the process, or at least intending to be content. And that's a very powerful framework to work within, because if we need to lose a certain amount of weight, if we need to feel a certain way, there's always going to be room for improvement. Sometimes wherever you are in the process, it might be perseverance. It might be like, I'm going to get through today and do the one action that I can, right? It's not going to always be hunky dory and wonderful. There's going to be challenging days. But with that framework, I think it's really empowering, because when we do meet our end, the mirror is going to come up only for ourselves. And we know from the studies and from the questionnaires we've given to people passing, the biggest thing was they wish they went for it. They wish they didn't just take the easy path. They wish they just didn't take, what's the worst case scenario? If you lose your job, you probably get a new job. You probably get, something else. It's not going to be that bad. You're not testing how powerful you are. And so if you want to comment on that, please go ahead. And if not, or you want to add to it, the follow-up question I was going to ask is, how, in your opinion, could we break generational trauma, these cyclical things? What would need to happen as a society? Would it be a change in education? What big things could happen where we could really support stopping harming our children, first of all, and healing, that generational thing that just continues to seem to be happening?
Yeah, well, to your first point, I mean, I think you're spot on. You can go read every one of these research studies, every one of these articles that you find. It's always about, I wish I would have gone for it on my deathbed. You don't have a promise of tomorrow. You have got to change your understanding of time. Nobody owes you another second more of life. Like, that's the reality. Like, the craziest thing about this, Matt, we're both gonna die. On a long enough time frame, we're dead. I don't know about you, but I don't want to wonder what if. Look, it's incredible. Believing in yourself. This is what I think happens. Like, I honestly do. I think that people are terrified to believe in themselves enough that they're willing to take the risk of failure. And because of that, they won't step into that until we're then faced, again, rock bottom moment, deathbed with, oh, it's too late. I can't change from here. You don't get another time. You don't get another moment, right? And so if you're contemplating, if you're even thinking about it and your gut says go for it, go for it. Because worst case, you can get right back to where you are right now. The measurement that you have is you have to look at the reality of, I have made it to this point before. Thus, this is a new threshold that I know that I'm able to reach. Okay, so if I fall back, I can come back here. All right, great. So now what? Go for it. Go for it and fail and learn and grow and understand something really incredibly important. The number one word that every one of my coaching clients knows is patience. You've got to be so incredibly patient. Matt, I've been doing this for almost 5 years. You just learned who I am, right? Think about this. There's 8 billion people on planet Earth trying to accomplish 8 billion different tasks. Realistically, if you trudge through it long enough, there will be something beautiful on the other side. But there's no overnight success. There's no 12-day overnight success. There's 20-year and 30-year and 18-year and a whole lot of time in between the moment you make a choice and the moment that that decision comes to fruition. But you have to go for it. No one else is going to live your dream for you. And again, like I said earlier, there's no Disney moment. There's not going to be any magical thing that suddenly is going to change your life forever. And you have to understand that. And if I could implore that into people in any other way other than saying it, if I had a magic pill that said change your reality with the concept of death, I would be a bazillionaire because people would start showing up for themselves. Now, to answer your question, look, to end generational trauma, I recognize it. My goal, my number one goal, the reason I get up every single day is to end generational trauma. I understand that on a long enough timeline, I'm going to die. That's not going to happen. Not within my lifetime, not within the context of understanding a millennia of abuse needing to be reframed, needing to be changed, continents of people who socially accept the idea of hurting children, right? Think about this. There is an 83% chance that you've had an adverse childhood experience, meaning that someone in your house was a drug addict and alcoholic, that you weren't fed or clothed properly, you weren't taken care of from a medical perspective, someone in your house had a suicide attempt, someone in your home went to prison, your mom or dad hit each other, the list goes on and on and on and on, right? And so there's a chance that you have 83% chance that you've had an adverse childhood experience. Now you multiply that across all humans on planet Earth. That's a lot of experiences. So the way I think about this is, can I move forward and towards this idea and this goal and this concept every single day by creating things that will outlive me, writing multiple books, podcasts, education, coaching. It's about an exponential growth. Again, mathematical equations here. If I can impact one person, and they can impact 20, and they can impact 100. Eventually, on a long enough timeline, we will reach that goal. Now, how do you do that right now in this moment? Again, it comes back to, can we have this conversation? Can we, as human beings, be in connection with each other about something kind of dark? Something that most people are very, very afraid to talk about because of shame, because of judgment, because of guilt, right? Which is totally reasonable. They come by that honestly. I relate. It took me a long time to be able to work through that to a point where I could use my story. And I don't think you have to use your story. I don't believe that anyone needs to talk about this in a way that's about shouting with a flag at the top of a mountain. It's about, can you heal yourself first and then ingrain that into your family, your children, your partner, your community, your neighborhood, your city, your state, your government, your country, your world. It's exponential. And so as we're adults, we start working with ourselves, become the best version of me, learn to love myself, work through the trauma, go to therapy, do the hard things, and then on the other side of it, start educating our children, start changing the way that we talk about what's emotionally acceptable. And then there has to be a collective change in the acceptability that we have in adults hurting children. It just doesn't make sense, man. Go and look at prison statistics. Over 80% of people in prison had an adverse childhood experience. What is the correlation? This isn't rocket science. It's statistics. It's in your face. We can't hide from the truth anymore. Matt, if we want to end this, if we want to move towards my goal, we have these conversations. We stop hiding from the truth. We give people the tools and education that they need. And then we double down and double down and double down and double down. And we commit as a species to stop being violent to our most vulnerable beings.
Well, I love all that. And, it reminds me of, what I've learned from my studies with the Native American elders and just the people. They talk about 7 generational thinking, and we don't do that. They think about 7 generations down the line, like what we do today and how that will impact 7 generations. And also with what your own example is, it's like understanding you can't fix it in this lifetime, but you're committing your life to it. So that becomes a legacy, right? That will be passed down through time, and all of us can leave a legacy. I'm reminded of this story that I read a couple of years ago, but it's basically there's 2 villages in the Middle East or somewhere foreign, and they're very poor, and one guy spent his whole life basically digging a road between these 2 villages because there's a big mountain pass, and it took him like something like 50 or 60 years, something absurd, and he eventually did it. You know what I mean? So he started chipping away, and it took him 60 years by himself, and created a road between these 2 villages that made, that connection of those 2 cities much easier. So it wasn't like a multi-day trek. And so that improved the lives of everybody for them to do that. And what kind of amazing vision or foresight would that be? Is like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. Right. And in that way, you got to think about the thankless nature of it, because I think so many people are like, well, what will I get? Well, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to get you exactly what you have right now, whatever you can take from the default world, right? When you talk about wherever you are, I always say the matrix will always take you back with warm, comfy, cozy arms, but that might be sedating you from the courage and the inspiration for you to create who you came here to be. And only you can sacrifice that, right? And only you can have the courage to build who you want to be and architect your life, architect your legacy. And it is going to take action. It's going to take courage, and it's going to take patience and consistency. But you can definitely do it. And the last thing I'm reminded of is, Alan Watts will just talk about the value of contemplating on your death. Tomorrow is not present, so when you contemplate on your death, you can actually free yourself to know that nothing is guaranteed. So are you being honest with yourself for how you're living today? And so, I know we're kind of running up on time, but I'd love for you to just speak a little bit on, you talk about concepts for overcoming fear, but leveraging your experiences to tap into power and just getting out of your own way with this self-sabotage nature that we so many of us have.
Yeah, look, I mean, self-sabotage is such a normative part of the human experience. It's probably been embedded in us since, we came out of the ooze, right? Or wherever we came from. I have no idea. But realistically, it is because we're terrified of the idea that on the other side of our effort, we could actually reach our potential. I'm going to say that again. We're terrified that on the other side of our effort, we could actually reach our potential. We could actually have what we want to have the life we want to have the love, the career, the family, even the possessions, right? And like, it starts with, you mentioned something really important, values. I could ask 100 people to name their values. 2 of them will be able to do it. I see it time and time and time again. You must know who you are. In order to move forward in your life, you have to be able to name them. Mine are honesty, kindness, self-actualization, and leadership, right? I understand that the framework and the scope of the way that I exist in my life starts with those core values, because with those values, I'm willing to move forward because I've recognized I have to be honest with myself first and foremost. I need to be a leader. I need to self-actualize, and I demand kindness. Right? You talk about the stories that we tell ourselves. I used to be the meanest person you could ever imagine to myself. That was the only thing I ever experienced. That was communication. That was the baseline. I assume that this is how you talk to yourself because that's how they talk to me. Thus, kindness became an irrevocable value. It will not ever go away. And so because I have my values, I know that I can move forwards and towards the goals that I want to have in my life because they are in alignment. First and foremost, get in alignment with yourself. Nothing else matters if you're not in alignment. If you can't answer the question of who am I, then you are not in alignment. It's not your job. It's not your career. It's your values. I am an honest leader who is kind, who self-actualizes. That's who I am at the heart of me, at the core. And that doesn't mean I don't fall back, Matt. That doesn't mean I don't make mistakes and I don't have failures. And sometimes I don't have to tell a lie, because I do, because I'm a human being, right? But the sabotage moves away further and further and further, the closer and closer and closer I get to me. Right? We must stop being afraid of being who we are. I'm obsessed with leaders, with people in the world who have done incredible things. And a lot of them are entrepreneurs. I would actually say the vast majority of them are, right? The one thing that I found to be in common that kind of sparked this moment, this conversation for me in this context, was about call it 9 years ago, somewhere in that window, 8, 9 years ago. I was reading all of these business books because I've been an entrepreneur for a long time now. And I kept noticing the one thing that all of these people I love and I look up to have in common is they are not afraid to be themselves. They've worked through the discomfort of being okay with the reflection in the mirror. If you want to stop self-sabotaging, you must do whatever it takes to be okay with the reflection in the mirror.
I love that. That's really powerful stuff. And it reminds me of just like the idea of everyone being unique. And what's happening is we're kind of going into these places that make us all the same, right? Same job. We got thousands of people of this job and that job. And if that job calls to you, fantastic. If it's uniquely you, if it's the expression of who you are by your own definitions, but you're only going to be the one who knows if you uniquely express. And there are so many different types of people, of interests, of curiosities. And so honoring yourself is so incredibly important. And the challenge is it's this money piece that people sabotage their dreams because I don't know how I'm going to make money from that. But you might sacrifice your life, you know what I mean, in doing that. And you don't know what you're going to be capable of. So we kind of idolize all of this money and this wealth possession. So it's like, how can I get all of that stuff by following who I am? Well, maybe following who you are is going to be your best shot at that. And that's also secondary, because if you're doing what you love and you're being honest with yourself, you're going to be content with who you are and what you have. And when that mirror comes up, you're going to be grateful. But if you sacrifice it, no amount of money is going to be enough for sacrificing who you came here to be, what you came here to do, and the impact you could have made.
Yeah, man. Look, dude, I would rather make $12 a year and be happy and content and be in alignment with who I am than make $1 million being miserable, putting on a smile, and having water cooler talk.
And you've kind of done both, right?
I've done, but that's why I know, right? Because
yeah,
exactly. Had I not been in corporate America, I would never have known how absolutely and foundationally horrid I feel in that environment.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can learn from people. We talk about, these stories, but when you live it, then you know for sure. And so you can also take those lessons, right? And
yeah, but if you don't go for it, you'll never live it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I just mean like so many people will talk about the living in corporate America and just being, morally or spiritually bankrupt.
Yeah.
So it just matters if your job is fulfilling you and you're helping others. And there's going to be a bridge. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job immediately. It means, intend and work towards the person in the life that you want to architect. And if you have a stable job that's helping you and your family, great. Just don't give up on that person that you want to create. Yes. Right? Grateful for where you are now. And like you said, give yourself patience for that long game. It might not be a year. It might not be 2. It might be 20 years, right? But if you live to 60 and you start at 40, that's 20 years of amazing work and life that you could be living. And again, it always just comes back to if you're being honest with yourself, that's the guide. So, I know you got to run, but I just appreciate you coming on the show. This has been brilliant. I've enjoyed this. I'm grateful for your work and what you're doing in the world because it's so necessary. Is there anything that you wish that I had asked or you want to leave the listeners with before we close it up?
Is there anything I wish that you'd ask? I don't think so. Look, I think when we're in these moments of connection, it is to be what it is meant to be, right? I will say this. There's one of the things that I'm doing. Actually, here, I'll ask a question. The thing that I wish you would ask is, what is it that I'm doing right now to change the world? So I actually recognized recently that the vast majority of everyone who consumes all of my content, the podcast, the books, the Instagram, is 82% female. And I am so incredibly appreciative of every single woman and female on planet Earth who is willing to be emotionally vulnerable. But men, we have to step our game up. It is no longer okay to live within toxic shame for being a man with emotional capacity. Matthew, one of the things that you mentioned, man, was you contemplated suicide. How do we not have a safe space to have that conversation, right? And so understanding and looking at the numbers of the research against knowing the ramifications of childhood trauma, men are vastly impacted by this. Some studies show that men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide and 49 times percent more, and it's a 49 percentile range of men who won't even have the conversation to begin with. So we must change that. So I'm launching a new coaching program called heallikeaman.com, because this is got to change, man. We have to change everything about what it means to be a man in society today.
That's powerful. I absolutely agree. There's a lot going on with men, and we could go a whole podcast on that. So I appreciate that work and that intention. We do, especially in today's climate, we need strong men to stand up, with having the scope and ability of emotional capabilities, right? That's how we know if we're making true decisions. We need to be able to feel emotion, and recognize who and what we are, and do it in a just an honorable way for ourselves. And we are taught not to feel, right? So there's a lot of stuff there, that all the men's work and stuff that I've done and heard from different people. It's very fascinating, where luckily I didn't have to go through that as much as others, but it is something that's very prevalent among men, not feeling, not healing, not speaking. And if you're holding that, it's going to be toxic within yourself, and you're not going to support others, you know what I mean? And you're not going to be able to live up to your full potential. So it's like dropping the weight of the stuff that holds us down, this anchors of stuff that can be dropped, so that we can be truly who we want to be. So just appreciate you. So where should people find you, go and connect if they want to learn more and stay connected?
Yeah, Matt, again, thank you so much. I love these questions. I love this conversation. I appreciate you greatly, my friend. I am everywhere at Michael Unbroken, and you can check out heallikeaman.com.
Amazing. Well, thanks for your work. Thanks for coming on. And this was a pleasure.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. See you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.